Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I'm Charles Aniagolo. Now, today, there's a new wave of fascinating multimedia artists whose work is at the center of modern-day life in Nigeria. They say that art is a place, and no matter the kind of political or ideological beliefs we have or our personal persuasion, we can meet at the junction of art and have amazing experiences together psychologically and spiritually. Well, as artistic freedom continues to blossom across Nigeria following decades of military rule, we attempt to explore the impact of artistic expression in the country and to gauge artistic freedom since the return of democracy in 1999 through Nigeria's new wave of contemporary artists. Well, let's get more on this now. Kingsley Okafor is a well-established art promoter with broad knowledge of the Nigerian art scene and many years of experience in the African art industry, and he joins me now in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. And just first of all, tell us, because you preside over more than 5,000 artists or so.
Yeah, well, I lead a group of artists in a association called APCAP, and it is a group more like an umbrella group of different associations of artists, and we try to help the artists to lift them up and then to the welfare of the artists.
Well, I mean, you must have a lot of art, because some of the stuff that I have seen, I mean, through your own gallery, but also generally, is just absolutely amazing, isn't it?
Well, I just sent you just a few of them. I've got over, in my studio, I've got over 1,000 of them at every moment. And what we do is try to project these artists from collaborations with Fast Viet and Lagos Paris Art.
Right.
And with Sonny, our common friend, Sonny Ojaga. And it's been a tremendous journey trying to lift this artist. But we represent more than, there are over 5 million.
And while we're talking, artists. It would be nice to be seeing some of those pieces of art, but keep talking.
Well, there are well over 5 million artists in Nigeria today, and you can see, you know, I sent you a lot of them, and it's not possible for me to know the titles, but I know every artist that I have, when I see the works, I identify who they are. For example, what you see now is the baggy women. It depicts the attitude of the baggy women, how they carry their loads and all of that. And then depression, and artists more or less try to express themselves from their creativity. And that's what we've seen in some of these visuals. You know, this is pandemic. It's a creation of mine from the period of the COVID pandemic when it started, and it's been that kind of journey for every artist.
So what sort of identity does contemporary art in Nigeria have today? And is it different from the art that prevailed, for example, during the war and the years of military rule that followed?
Well, if you talk about artistic expression, it's simply the conscious use of imagination to create objects that comes in forms of paintings, it could be sculpture, it could be in music, creative writing, and all of that. It's been the same situation, but if you want to know exactly what's going on today, you have to check the trajectory of the history of the movement of art from pre-colonial days, where every ethnic group in Nigeria has practiced some kind of art. And, you know, they have different cultures. They express themselves, be it for religious purposes, be it for civil purposes, be it for even law enforcement in the communities that we used to have. But then the influence of the white men who came into Nigeria influenced some of the artworks, and then we began to see changes. And there's been a total transformation. But
would you say that pre-colonial art was more sculpture and things like that?
No, it
like
wasn't.
Carvings and so on,
rather
than paintings?
Well, they were more or less contemporary, sculptural works. If you look at the works of the Noctera culture, the Benin art, and all of that. For example, in 1897, the punitive Benin expedition, when 6,500 artworks were carted away from Nigeria, they had historical value with the works of Mona Lisa, with the works of Rembrandt, Van Gogh, and all of them. And these works were in the neighborhood of $7 million. So if you multiply $7 million into 6,500 works, we're talking about almost 20 trillion naira today. So when we look at the creative industry and look at the artworks that we produced in the past, they are quite humongous in terms of value. But today our artists are doing their best. If you look at Njideka Akunyili's artwork, the Bush Babies, sold for $3.5 million.
Absolutely. In fact, the Sotheby's got in touch with me when they did a big sale of that art. And I think that was one of the biggest selling ones. The other one was Ben Nwonwu, of course.
Yeah, well, Ben Nwonwu had the tutu, which was sold for $1.6 million until Akunyili's work came. And then Odutola and all the rest of them, Jamas Nwoko. So we have an array of these works. But the problem because, I mean, I don't want to shake the table, but if we could shake the table, it's important to understand that there's not enough support for the creative industry in Nigeria. Otherwise, we would be having artists who can raise the kind of money that we don't even need to borrow. Today, I read in the papers that we've borrowed almost 32 trillion. But we're talking about artists that can produce works that are exportable and that we can be able to cover all of this.
And is there one identity of art that is encouraged and presented in Nigeria? Or are there lots of hidden artistic identities that are sometimes unpleasant but are rarely told? For instance, you know, from some of the things that I saw from you, the pandemic, not so much the pandemic, but the insurgency in the north, you know, pollution in the Niger Delta, that kind of thing, well, you know, that have a strong political element.
Like I said, artistic expression is just conversion of the imagination into products that can be appreciated. So every artist has the perception to interpret his environment on his work. A lot of the people who paint, some of my artists who paint from the northern, from say Niger State, they paint the picture of a distorted environment, a painting of a war situation, and then you expect artists from the Niger Delta to also...
Well, we're looking at a picture of the Niger Delta there, which is the one, I think it's pollution.
Yes, the pollution from an artist called Monday, you know. Some of those works depict the environment that they operate in, and it makes it difficult for them. That's all they see. I have a little boy, a 10-year-old autistic, 11-year-old autistic
yes, I think we've got that picture
that I
of the 10-year-old boy.
I mean, the picture he paints of the depression is what he understands. That's what he's on TV.
That's him on the screen.
That's him. It's Kanye Okeke. He's 11 years, he has autism, and all he can do is depict his imagination through his pictures, through those visuals. And you could see the riotous environment, the colors, the mixture and all of that. That's what he sees. That's what he has on TV. So every artist is able to interpret his environment based on what he sees, what he encounters, and what his environment gives to him.
And obviously that art on the edge, if you like, enriches the world of Nigerian art, and you export quite a few of these things, do you?
Yeah, we've done.
I mean, I think that's what you're doing with Sonny Ojega.
That's what I do with Sonny, and that's what I do with the. I'm originally a sculptor, but having gone to Sotheby's to study the business of art, what I do now is to promote artists. But you find in an environment where artists basically have to do everything for themselves. In Nigeria, you talk about creative industry, all they know about is music, fashion, and all of that. But the critical aspect of the creative industry is the visual art. And this is a function of decay in leadership.
But what are you expecting? I mean, it's not the Nigerian government's job to do every single thing. I mean, you guys, there's a huge market. I mean, you're selling lots of paintings internationally. You're talking about several of them making millions.
Let me tell you about that.
It's not dependent on the government.
You just said that Sotheby's in New York spoke to you about Njideka Akunyili. If she was operating here, it probably she probably won't have access to Sotheby's to sell that kind of work. We're not talking about artists selling works for 200,000, 500,000. We're talking about mega bucks. We're talking about artists being able to have the functional basic support. In 2019, I took 25 artists to Casablanca. Every artist basically paid everything. But we're in a country where people are paid to go to Rome, to go to Mecca, and all of that. And they just go there, have fun, and come back. We're talking about giving artists support to be able to live that level where they operate and play in the big league. We have to be competitive in the world global
right.
stage.
So basically you're saying this is an industry like any other industry that needs to be supported.
Not just being supported. This is the industry that is the second highest employer of labor after agriculture. The creative industry, everything that's happened in Nollywood.
The musicians are doing very well.
Yeah,
Nollywood is doing very well.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not getting, they're not being sort of hand-fed by the Nigerian government.
I tell you this, if you follow the trajectory of the support that we're getting in Nigeria, the last time they said they had $500 million, 500 million naira or dollars or whatever, I can't remember exactly what it is, for the creative industry. It was just for the music, for the fashion, for the Nollywood. Nobody talked about the visual art,
right,
which is the critical aspect. And that's why I do all the time. When I talk sometimes, the people in power think that I'm more or less advocating for the creative, for the visual art, but this is the creative aspect of the creative industry. So all they need is a little support to be able to excel and play.
Right. And in terms of global influences, are they having much of an impact on art and culture in Nigeria? Are Western influences becoming more and more prevalent as American culture continues to have an impact on people's sort of everyday lives in Nigeria?
Well, it's the other way around. Unlike the music industry being influenced by the American and European influence, the artists that operate here do not need those influences.
Yeah, but actually, it's not fair to say that, because Nigerian music is influencing a lot of Western music. I mean, if you look at everybody from Beyonce to, a lot of the new musicians, they're all incorporating Afrobeats into their sound.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, in effect, is that a lot of the artists that produce here do not need that influence. With the deluge of galleries emerging in Nigeria and voices speaking about Nigerian art and all of that, the Americans and the Europeans are more or less coming to be influenced with what the kind of works that we make here. And that you see artists creating waves all over the world based on the fact that they're beginning to appreciate the raw art.
Yeah, but perhaps what you ought to do, and I'm not telling you your job, because obviously you have a lot more experience than I do in that sense, but perhaps what you ought to do is to create, I mean, Nigeria's got 200 million people and quite a lot of very art appreciative people in this country. Perhaps what you ought to do is create a local market.
Yeah, but you need
that actually attracts a lot of people, because that's what Nollywood did.
Yeah, but
I mean, Nollywood created a local market before it then went international. The same thing with music.
Well, the difference, if you have a country where there's predominantly 100 million poor people, art is not really for the poor.
Yeah, but you're concentrating on the bad aspects. I mean, there are good aspects in the sense that there are people who can afford to buy
those are the people that the markets that we're getting already.
Right.
But if you have over 200 million Nigerians and over 5 million Nigerians practicing artworks, and you have over 100 million poor people, art is not really cheap. If I do a painting, I sell it for a minimum of 1 million. I mean, how many people can afford that? So all we need is to break into the international market and be able to play art, be competitive. We have what it takes. We don't need to import any raw material. It's only in art that you have everything you need here to produce. I can sit in my room in 45, 50, 1 hour. I produce a painting that can give me $1 million.
Well, that's probably why it shouldn't be that expensive.
No, but the thing is, how many of them really can afford some of those little materials?
No, but in fairness to you, I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be expensive, because obviously that is your creative, the creative force inside you. But stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including much more from Kingsley Okafor, who is talking to us about art in modern-day Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Now, as you may know, the global market in modern African art is growing. Today, in the leading capitals of the world, top auction houses have been holding regular sales in response to the clamor and demand for works by Nigerian and African artists around the world. Everything from a selection of paintings and drawings are included taken from across Nigeria and the African continent, with a particular focus on the post-colonial era and contemporary times. The last time Sotheby's in London, for instance, held a big auction of African art was just about a year ago, and it greatly exceeded estimates, with many African artists achieving record-breaking sales. Beyond the works of the likes of Ibrahim Mahama, Njideka Akunyili Crosby, and Ben Enwonwu, there are many new names from Nigeria and the continent who are joining the queue and drawing international attention to their works, impressive artworks. And the art promoter, Kingsley Okafor, who has for many years of experience in the African art industry, is still with me in the studio. Thank you ever so much for staying with us.
Thank you, Charlie.
Tell us about yourself and how you got into art.
Well, I pretty more or less grew up finding myself sketching all the time and drawing and all of that. And then when it was time to go to university, everybody wanted me to go and read law and all of it, because I was very bright, you know, without being modest.
If you might say so yourself.
I was based on records that I was making from schools.
Right.
But I had to major in fine arts, majoring in sculpture in University of Benin. And then, but I felt that there was a bit of gap, because today your talent is not enough. You could be the best artist in the world, but you probably starve to death. So we needed to close that gap to be able to have the business of art. I'm writing a book now about how to sell your artwork, and it's already going to be in Amazon and all of that. And so we're trying to be able to break that jinx, to be able to help the artists to be able to sell their works. Because if you have all the talent and you make paintings and they offer your wardrobes, you end up not impacting anybody's life and impacting yourself as well. So that's how I ended up being more into the promotion of art. But once in a while I do paintings, I do sculpting and all of that.
Right, and you reach out to international organizations.
Yes, I have a wide network of contacts with my collaborations with Sonny Ojaga and Fajvia and a couple of other art agencies that I collaborate with.
Right, and what do they actually do for you?
What I do is negotiate exhibitions for artists.
Right.
And I believe that in a couple of years, if not too long from now, we'll be able to lift at least 1 million artists out of poverty.
Right.
Because a lot of artists are quite poor because the environment does not help them. I was telling you off record here about the museums in UK, in US and all of that. And we have museums in Nigeria. I don't know the last time you had anybody going to the museum in Nigeria. I mean, we're not saying that because you don't go to museum to buy artworks, but it helps to create the consciousness about the creative industry and all of that. And people go to museum, they see works of art, and they come back, they probably want to buy an artwork to put in there. I mean, there has to be a regulation as well between the professionals and the roadside artists. I mean, it is only here that you find people who have no knowledge of the creative industry manning organs of government where the creative industry is involved. And you don't expect them to excel.
No, absolutely.
I mean,
I agree.
If you take an engineer and make him the head of an industry, health industry, he probably won't be able to operate. So we're saying reject the whole situation and put people who understand the industry to man the industry, so that because they have the passion to be able to touch the lives of the
Absolutely.
artists.
And I mean, when you do the work that you do, because obviously you yourself, in addition to being looking at the business side of art, you're also, I mean, an artist yourself.
Yes, I paint, I sculpt.
How much of your personal identity intrudes into that art that you are creating? And how important is it that it is that element of you that's going into it?
800%. An artist is a messenger. All you do is interpret your intuition.
They call them the
imagination.
Unacknowledged legislators of the world.
Of the world. That's exactly what it is. You've obviously done your research. So what you do as an artist is be able to take all your perceptions and intuitions and imaginations and pour it down, express it into an object that can be appreciated as an artwork. And that way it comes out either in paintings or in sculpture, in music, in weaving, in poetry, in creative writing.
But do you then use that as a theme for your exhibitions? For example, in a country like Nigeria, where there's been considerable insurgency in the northeast, banditry in the northwest, militancy in the Niger Delta, that sort of thing. Do you use political themes like that when you hold an exhibition, which may well create sort of an attraction for
well, in the realm of the business of art,
right?
When you look at an array of artworks that you have, you pick out the unifying force, the unifying thing that will bring together the works. Then you look at the market as well. There are some volatile titles that you give to an exhibition, it probably wouldn't attract people. So you need to balance the business and balance the creativity, you know. So if you have most of the artists producing works from, say, the northern Nigeria, paintings that have violence and all of that, it depicts the mood that they can imagine. And so this is usually the situation. When you have artworks like that, you pick a title that will not be, that'll be able to attract people, because people don't want to come and see some gory stories all the time.
Sure, of course.
So you probably have a mild title, but when you come to the exhibition, you'll be able to.
And we're looking at some of the insurgency paintings that were on the screen.
That's from one of the artists from Niger State. Matter of fact, he painted this just a few weeks before the abduction, and when I asked him the title, he wasn't in a situation to even tell me exactly what the title was, because he said, "Don't I understand what's going on in Niger State?" I said, "But you have to be careful where you operate and be conscious and be alive to be able to reap the fruits of your, of your creativity."
And so, obviously, parallel to your artwork that you yourself create and produce, you've got into the profession of being a business manager of artwork. Which of the two do you find to be more rewarding? And I'm not necessarily talking about financial.
Well, rewarding, because if I'm able to help the artists sell their works, I'm rewarded. So I'm more or less a creative arts development economist.
Right.
So what I do now is to be able to make sure that the artists get reward for their creativity, because like I said earlier, your talent is not enough anymore. So when
in anything you've got to sell it.
Well, you have to package yourself properly to be able to compete globally.
And was it always clear to you that art is what you wanted to do?
I've never thought about doing anything else.
Right.
All I've done, and I've been very well rewarded, you know. And I think that it is important for us to be in professions that we have the passion, not just for the money, but to be able to have this feeling that you're rewarded for what you're doing. And I'm happy. My happiest moments is when I'm painting, or when I'm organizing an exhibition. Sometimes my wife quarrels with me, and then I have to eat and stuff like that. When I'm planning an exhibition, I could go the whole day without food because I'm so consumed and enmeshed in the aspect of what I'm trying to do.
And of course there is an educational side to all of that. We saw some of those paintings that you were talking about. There's also quite a lot of paintings that have connections with Nigeria's past history, those through the art. Is that something that's important to do as a way of almost a biography of the history of this country?
Yeah, well, art is more like a means of telling the history of a people. If you look at the Noctera culture, the Benin art, the Ife, the Mbari art, and all of that, they tell a history of the people. And as they evolve, you begin to see more contemporary works. And that is why when you look at some of those works, sometimes you see some artists taking some aspects of what the ancient artworks were to be able to infuse into the modern arts that they do.
Okay. Kingsley, I want to thank you very much indeed. Kingsley Okafor is an art promoter who has many years of experience in the African art industry. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and London, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.